Oh, hello, come on in. Welcome to my lab. I was just getting ready to test a reaction when I mixed these two chemicals together. But before I begin, this would be a good time to review the rules for maintaining a safe and functional lab. I always follow the laboratory safety rules, and I require all of my assistants to know the rules as well. Speaking of assistants, this is Amy. She'll be helping us out today.
Hello, everybody.
Today we're going to talk about some of the rules that keep us safe in a lab. Being safe in a lab isn't just something that your teachers ask you to do. You have to follow these precautions in any lab. Forensics experts, lab technicians, even firefighters and hazard teams have to follow safety rules. They do it because the rules keep them safe. First, we'll cover general safety. Then we'll discuss rules for more specific situations like first aid, fire and heat, chemicals, glassware, sharp instruments, and the proper cleanup methods. So let's get started.
Dr. Klein, are we going to do some more experiments today? I really liked the ones we did last week.
Yes, we are. Why don't you go get ready? Loose hair needs to be pulled back and out of the way. Tuck in loose clothing and cover it with a lab coat. Remove any loose jewelry as well. Make sure you wear proper safety clothing when appropriate. This would consist of a lab apron or coat, rubber gloves and safety glasses, goggles, or a shield. You should also wash your hands before and after each experiment, and after you've handled chemicals.
Okay, Dr. Klein, I'm all ready.
Good. If you grab your clipboard, we can read through the steps to the experiment. Always read all directions for an experiment several times and follow them exactly as they were written. This means that you should never perform any activities or handle any equipment unless you are instructed to do so. Okay, Amy, if you've collected all the materials and you've read the instructions, you may begin. Do you have any questions?
No, it's pretty clear.
Okay. Be careful not to spill. If a spill does occur, immediately rinse your skin or clothes with water. Ask your teacher how to properly clean up the spilled chemical. Do not pour chemicals or other materials into the sink or trash container. They could erode drains or mix dangerously with other chemicals. One more thing about general lab safety. Never eat or drink in the laboratory. If they spill, they could cause a mess or even ruin the experiment. Food and beverage can become contaminated with chemicals without you even knowing it. This could make you very sick. And if you're thirsty, drink a beverage outside and wash your hands before and after you take your break. Okay, Amy, this is a good time to go over our first aid rules.
You got it, Dr. Klein.
Okay, now say your lab partner cuts his hand. What steps do you follow?
Well, first I would tell my teacher right away. Then I would get the first aid kit if it was needed. If there were a fire, I would get the fire extinguisher. They're both on the wall by the door. If I needed to call anybody else, the phone numbers for the fire and police departments, as well as poison control and the school nurse, are listed beside the phone.
Great job, Amy. It is important for every student to know where all these things are located and how to use them. You never know when you may have to make an emergency call or use a fire extinguisher. Precious minutes could be wasted looking for a phone number. You should also know the location and procedure for other safety equipment, such as fire blankets and eye wash stations.
Hey, Dr. Klein, speaking of fire, the next step calls for us to use a Bunsen burner.
That's right. Why don't you get that set up, and then we'll go over fire and heat safety rules. While working with any kind of heat source, you need to always be careful. Always follow the safety rules to prevent injury. The first thing you want to do, even before you turn on the burner, is to put on your safety goggles. Goggles protect your eyes from fumes when working with heat and chemicals. Okay, Amy, now I want you to take mixture A, pour it into the test tube, and heat it up.
You got it.
Now, never heat anything unless your teacher tells you to. All chemicals react differently to heat. One that is harmless when cool may become extremely dangerous when heated. There are a few specific rules to follow once the burner is turned on. Just like the burners on a stove, a Bunsen burner can get quite hot, so you should never touch it. Also, it is important not to walk away and leave a burner unattended. You never know what might happen. When the Bunsen burner is on, never reach across the flame, not even if there's a large beaker covering it. If you do, your clothes could catch on fire or you could burn yourself. The safest thing to do is walk to the other side of the burner. Whether you're heating a test tube or a beaker, be sure to point it away from yourself and others. When liquids boil, sometimes they splash. You don't want a potentially dangerous chemical to get on your skin or anyone else's. Always use open containers when you're using a Bunsen burner. Never heat anything in a closed container. Expanded gases may blow the container apart. And finally, always use tongs, clamps, or heat-resistant gloves when handling containers. Using your bare hands could result in serious burns.
Wow, that's really cool how the heated mixture changed the colors of the different chemicals.
It sure is. Every chemical reacts to temperatures differently. And speaking of different chemicals, you will use many throughout the course of a lab class. They will be in different colors and textures. Some may be hazardous. I think now is a good time to go over chemical safety rules. Don't ever taste, touch, or smell a chemical unless your teacher tells you to do so. Many chemicals are poisonous to taste, hazardous to smell, and may burn skin when touched. Never use more of a chemical than is needed, and be sure to dispose of it properly. Any leftover chemicals should be put away before you begin your experiment. Always properly dispose of the chemicals you use when you're finished. All labs should have special containers for this purpose. Only mix the chemicals that you are told to mix. Never randomly mix chemicals. Doing so could produce a dangerous, possibly even explosive substance. When working with chemicals, always wear proper safety attire. Use care when holding chemicals. Be careful not to spill them on yourself or your work area. And remember to wash your hands after handling each one.
Dr. Klein, I need to grab a couple more beakers before I can finish this next one.
One of the things we use a lot in laboratories is glassware. Like everything else in the lab, there are some very specific rules to follow concerning glassware. You should never eat or drink from laboratory containers. They can be contaminated with chemicals that could be hazardous for you to consume. Even if the glass appears to be clean, residue could be left over from a previous experiment. When glass is heated, it gets hot. To avoid burns, do not handle heated glassware with your bare hands. You can't tell by looking at glass how hot it is, so always use tongs, clamps, or heat-resistant gloves to pick it up. If a beaker or tube is broken or chipped, do not use it, even if it's the last available test tube. If glassware breaks or chips during your experiment, tell your teacher and dispose of it in the proper trash container. When you've finished using your glassware, always properly clean it and put it away. Improperly cleaned glassware may retain chemicals, which could affect the results of the next experiment, not to mention make a toxic combination. How's it going, Amy?
Great. The next step says for us to cut up this tablet and put it in the solution.
Right. Lab assignments occasionally require you to cut things. Scalpels and razor blades require extreme care. You shouldn't rush when you're using sharp instruments. Always be careful and never point the tip toward others or yourself. When you need to use a scalpel, always cut with the sharp part facing away from you and others. You should never cut materials with the sharp edge toward you. Cutting away reduces the chances of injuring yourself. But if you do cut yourself when using a scalpel, tell your teacher right away. Even if the cut is minor, clean and treat it to keep infections from growing.
One last step. Wow, it's bubbling like crazy.
Great job, Amy. You've completed your experiment successfully. When you're all finished with your experiment, don't think you're finished with your work. There are still some things you need to do after the experiment. Cleanliness helps keep a workspace safe. Be sure to clean your work area and supplies and return everything to their proper place. Make sure all burners and gas lines are turned off. Lab work can be quite exciting in the classroom and in the field. There's an opportunity to do some really exciting things. But remember, safety is the #1 priority in all labs. You'll need to know these rules to do well, not only in school, but to work in a real lab someday. So follow these rules. We want you to have fun and stay safe.
Thanks for joining us. Bye.